11 p.m. Tuesday, a text from my spouse read, "Stay away tonight, space needed." In a Charlotte Marriott parking lot, I remained, dressed in a suit, clutching untouched Thai food picked up due to her presumed hunger. The meal grew colder. I scrutinized the message thrice. A single reply followed, "Okay." Headed to the hotel, checked in, set an alarm for 5:30 a.m. and laid atop the bed, staring at the ceiling, aware of something she was unaware of, a truth I'd known for 11 days. By morning, as Renata slumbered in our self-built Dilworth house, a Zillow listing appeared professionally shot. Over the asking price, detailed description, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, original hardwood floors, my handcrafted pergola, and 47 calls before 9 a.m. from her. The 48th one I answered. If this story resonates with your experiences or someone you know, click subscribe immediately. Share below what was the defining moment when you sensed a significant shift. I read all comments. Don't forget to like this post. It makes these stories more accessible. My name is Holden Crest, aged 44. I'm an attorney specializing in real estate law in Charlotte, North Carolina, thus I am familiar with property law, deed transfers, and listing agreements more than most prefer. For 17 years, I've scrutinized contracts, finalized transactions, and counseled clients on their assets, debts, and rights during divorce proceedings. I never imagined I would require that expertise personally. For 12 years, I was the type of husband who believed exertion was sufficient. I worked diligently, returned home, and attended events. For our 10th anniversary, we vacationed in Asheville and Portugal, and I believed that was the essence of love in the long-term presence, consistency, a man who didn't vanish. Renata operated an interior design business from a studio near South End, and she excelled at it, truly gifted, the kind of individual who could enter a room and instantly visualize its potential. She had strong opinions about all aspects. Paint hues, lighting fixtures, the precise alignment of a sofa by a window, and I found her 9 out of our 12 years together to be endearing. The house in Dilworth was hers in essence, despite both our names being on the title deed. She designed every square inch of it. The custom-made study bookshelves, the kitchen island crafted from a Brazilian quartzite slab, the master bathroom featuring a freestanding tub that cost more than my first car. I wrote the checks and asked few questions because seeing her breathe life into that house brought her joy in a manner I didn't entirely comprehend but appreciated observing. We did not have children. This was a decision we made jointly in our early 30s, or so I believed. Renata was firm about it. She asserted that her work was her calling, and she couldn't fulfill both a child and her clients as they deserved. I agreed to that. I convinced myself I accepted it. On reflection, I ponder if there were many things I accepted without proper examination. The first instance when something felt amiss, I attributed it to stress. That was September, around 14 months before the night of the text. Renata had secured a significant contract, the renovation of a boutique hotel in Noda, an arts district north of uptown Charlotte. It was her biggest project yet. She exhibited excitement I hadn't seen in years, almost vibrant with it, working late, taking calls at unusual hours, and texting incessantly. I considered that's how she defined success for herself. I felt proud of her. She began working on weekends, then Sundays. Our routine of discussing my cases during dinner was broken. I used to explain intricate property law issues, her showing genuine interest and asking insightful questions. That ceased. I told myself we were both occupied and this was just a phase. Then in November, I spotted she'd altered her phone passcode. She had the same sequence since the year we got married. I noticed the alteration as I instinctively attempted the old code, only to find it no longer functioned. She was in the kitchen. I put the phone down without comment. It was then that I started observing closely. I'm not given to dramatics. I didn't engage a private investigator or rummage through her purse or trail her car. I'm an attorney. In terms of facts, I acknowledge that emotional suspicions aren't based on evidence. Instead, I adopted a neutral stance, similar to my approach in cases. I observed carefully, noting patterns and discrepancies. Time, as it often does, provided revelations. The hotel renovation project introduced us to Sullivan Price, the lead architect of NODA, a 40-year-old transplant from Denver who moved to Charlotte 2 years prior. I encountered him only once at a project launch dinner on North Davidson Street in December. He was tall, quiet, radiating an unspoken confidence that suggested he'd never experienced rejection. He addressed Renata by a nickname unfamiliar to me. She seemed amused by his jokes before he even finished speaking. I exchanged a handshake with him, drove us home, and remained silent. In January, I discovered a receipt in Renata's coat pocket when I was taking her jacket to the dry cleaner, a restaurant on Park Road, during a Saturday afternoon. The receipt showed 2 orders of food and 1 bottle of wine. Renata had informed me that she was at a design consultation in Ballantine on that Saturday. I stood in our kitchen, holding that receipt for quite some time, and then reacted as any methodical individual would when they suspect the core of their life could be unstable. I began to plan, not out of anger or revenge, but from a cold, practiced response, the instinct of a person who has spent his entire career safeguarding others from the consequences of failed agreements. Here's something many people don't know about real estate law in North Carolina. Marital property is equitable distribution, not equal distribution. That's not just a technicality, it's everything. It means a court doesn't divide assets equally without intervention. The assessment considers factors like contributions, circumstances, and economic responsibilities. This implies that a spouse who supports financially, maintains the household, and holds the majority of professional assets won't necessarily lose half of everything in division. I was well aware of this. I've counseled clients about such dynamics for numerous times. I knew what steps to take before any legal proceedings started. I knew which discussions to initiate and when, and importantly, which ones to postpone. I didn't speak to Renata about it. Instead, I contacted my colleague Petra Nakamura at her East Trade Street office. Petra specializes in domestic litigation, particularly high-asset divorces. I've directed clients to her for a decade. On my professional call with her, I provided the situation in a straightforward manner. She asked 3 questions, which I answered. She suggested we meet on Thursday. I did. The meeting with Petra lasted 2 hours. She outlined my position and detailed the necessary documents. She detailed a possible initial tactical choice. Later, she expressed something I was aware of but required confirmation from another lawyer. In any case, Holden, avoid confronting her until you're prepared, as once she becomes aware of your knowledge, the timer begins. I wasn't ready at that moment. I required 11 more days. Those 11 days were the most peculiar in my existence. I continued working, examined title searches, arranged deed transfers, and attended a closing for a development on Charlotte's South Park side that I had been overseeing for 18 months. I returned home to a house still fragranced with Renata's candles, her design magazines piled on the coffee table, and her voice echoing through the rooms. I dined with my spouse. I inquired about her day. She asked about mine. We watched television in the same room. I have never felt more isolated in my life, and I have never been so constrained. For I was aware by the time those 11 days commenced that. I was aware that the house in Dilworth was entirely funded using my premarital assets and joint savings, which I could prove. I knew that while Renata's design business was thriving, it experienced losses during our first 4 years of marriage and relied partially on income I generated within the household. I was familiar with the fact that my name was on the mortgage and that the property had increased in value by almost 60% since its purchase. Additionally, under North Carolina equitable distribution, factors like economic misconduct, including marital fault, are taken into account. However, there was something else I knew, something urgent, unrelated to law, but rather centered around the precise calculations of her impending actions. Renata had been telling others that we were doing well, including clients, friends, and her mother in Greensboro. I became aware due to a text from her closest friend, Darcy, who attended our wedding and held affection for me both individually and apart from Renata, inquiring about my well-being in February. She mentioned that Renata appeared preoccupied and something seemed amiss. Darcy didn't understand the significance of what she was disclosing. She merely wanted to check up on me. I assured Darcy everything was fine and continued observing. The text arrived on a Tuesday in March, an unusually chilly evening in Charlotte. 48 degrees felt freezing by local standards. Having worked late, I dined at a Thai restaurant on Central Avenue and received the message while parked in my office building's garage. The message read, "Don't come home tonight. I need space." 7 words without punctuation in the second sentence, the kind of message one sends after careful consideration. I responded with a simple okay and headed to the Marriott on South Tryon instead. Afternoon conversation with Petra wasn't related to the upcoming text, as I hadn't known it was imminent. Instead, we discussed finalized subsequent moves. The listing had been prepared priorly. 3 days ago, I secured a photographer for the task. Already talked to Grant Whitfield, a real estate agent from Providence Road firm, outlining the specifics cautiously and tactfully. With 2 decades in Charlotte's residential market, he was familiar with stealthy transactions. The listing was waiting for my authorization to be live, poised from that Marriott bed with open blinds revealing the Charlotte skyline subtly through the glass. I sent him a simple text, "Proceed." Then I set an alarm and couldn't sleep. Before describing that eventful morning, there are some crucial details about the preceding 11 days that warrant explanation because they held significance I didn't fully grasp during those moments. Those 11 days marked the culmination, not the start, of something that had been gradually waning for more than I cared to acknowledge. Perhaps even longer than Renata and I were willing to admit jointly. Marriages don't collapse in an instant. They erode across hundreds of tiny moments, each appearing as something innocuous. Shortened conversations, silences that lost their comforting aspect and became cautious, habits of omitting certain questions because acknowledging them would necessitate answering. This gradual deterioration had been taking place in our house on Matilda Avenue, Dilworth, for at least 2 years, possibly longer. I am now aware of this. At the time, I was too engrossed and devoted to the image of our life that I cherished, failing to recognize the signs. I had constructed a fulfilling life. I desired it to be mutual. The 11 days spanned from when I first realized that it wasn't shared in the way I required. When the time came for action, I don't employ the term lightly, it's precise. Action had to be taken from a clear mind, not in response. Decisions had to hold up 3 years later, 5 years later. I had to be the man I molded myself into, defying instincts pulling me towards rougher, destructive paths. So I prepared, waited. Then at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, she sent a text, ending the wait. Let me describe what it means to be methodical in a crisis. People believe that those who handle crises calmly don't feel them. That's incorrect. I felt every fiber of that night. I remembered how Renata had laughed the first time I took her to see the Dilworth house, standing in the empty living room, pointing at the crown molding, sharing her vision with me. Reflected on our 10-year anniversary dinner on a Lisbon terrace, the soft glow cascading over the river, the moment she gazed at me from across a table and expressed her inability to envision another existence. Reminisced about the previous Christmas, a truly enjoyable one, spent with her family in Greensboro, the kind of holiday that leaves you feeling grounded. Pondered, was any of it genuine, or was I the only one who fully experienced it? Then my alarm rang, waking me up, and I resumed my role as an attorney. Her first call came at 7:12 a.m. while I was in the hotel restaurant with a coffee and a legal brief I wasn't paying attention to. Watched my phone light up, Renata. Ignored the voicemail. She called again at 7, 14, 7, 17, and 4 more times before 7:30. Figured she would have seen the listing as I knew her morning internet habits. For years, she had Google alerts active for properties in our neighborhood to monitor competitors' designs in similar homes on Zillow. The automatic notification arrived when her creation, a design masterpiece crafted by her own hands, was listed as a commodity with professional photos and a 6-figure price tag. As I pondered the implications, there was no sense of fulfillment, only a painful, hollow clarity. By the 9th call, voicemails started pouring in, a sequence that began with confusion, escalated to anger, approached panic, and finally resonated with an emotion she hadn't exhibited in years, something raw, authentic, frightened. By the 20th call, messages were more subdued. By the 30th, they ceased. After 47 calls, I eventually picked up. "Holden," she sobbed, her voice hoarse from crying. I recognized the unique sound of Renata weeping. For about 12 years, her tears had only fallen on 6 or 7 occasions because she was hardly prone to emotional outbursts. Each instance felt like an atmospheric disruption. This moment was echoing that sound. "Holden, what have you done?" I responded. "I've put the house up for sale." "Grant Whitfield has the listing," I added. "He anticipates potential buyers this week as Dilworth's market is quite active currently." You can't simply, Holden, it's my house," she countered. "Both our names are on the deed," I retorted. "But you know the finances better than that," I stated. A pause followed, then another one, heavier this time. You've known for a while," I asserted. Another silence ensued. The kind with palpable weight. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, to which she offered no immediate response. Instead, I heard her breaths. Softly, a familiar sound echoed, the 3rd step creak in the house, indicating her presence in the now numbered property. "Where are you?" she queried. I'm in an office, I replied, adding that I would stay at the Marriott until legalities were sorted out. Petra Nakamura was managing my affairs. I advised her to contact someone promptly. Petra Nakamura, do you already have a lawyer? I clarified that I am an attorney with 17 years of experience under my belt. A pause followed before I shared the house listing details, mentioning she should familiarize herself with market materials. She emitted an ambiguous sound, not quite a word, then said, "Holden, I made a mistake." "I understand," I acknowledged. "So have I on multiple occasions over a span of time. Let's discuss all of them later," she suggested, "but not until we establish a framework." I ended the call, and somehow my hands remained surprisingly still, with no clear reason behind it. Apart from minor discrepancies, I had spent 3 months meticulously readying myself for that juncture, and planning is the solitary skill I am adept at amidst fear. The subsequent periods were not pristine. Allow me to be candid about it. There exists a narrative of this tale where the methodical individual remains unfazed, where the lawyer who foresaw everything glides through the dissolution of his marriage unscathed. That's not this storyline. Instead, I relocated to an apartment on the 9th floor of a building in uptown Charlotte, which had white walls and someone else's discarded furniture in the wardrobe, and a city view that was technically impressive, but felt like peering into another person's life. I procured groceries online for the initial week, as I was unaware of how to be a solitary grocery shopper. Over 12 years of marriage, I had become accustomed to making adjustments for two individuals in every household task. How much coffee, what to store in the refrigerator, how many towels. The acquired knowledge now seems pointless and challenging to discard. I contacted my older brother, Fletcher, residing outside Denver, detailing the recent events. Fletcher, with a maturity of 3 years on me and married to his college sweetheart for 20 years, exudes an unyielding humor that I've long admired. He listened attentively without interruptions, a characteristic of Fletcher. When I concluded, he commented, "You appear to be coping better than you actually are." "Perhaps," I replied. The house listing move was daring. It was calculated, I admitted. "Holden," he said softly, "I understand, but it had a certain level of audacity." I expressed this affectionately. My father phoned upon learning the news, as Fletcher had informed him first, a habitual act of his. 71 years old, my father resides outside Raleigh in a house he's inhabited for 3 decades. He opines on many topics, even my marriage, opinions he had previously kept hidden during Renata and my relationship, but are now surfacing with the cautious openness of hindsight. He remarked, "I presumed your affection for her surpassed hers for you." I chose not to contradict him. Instead, I thanked him and shared that I would be visiting Raleigh soon. In the office, I informed my partner and trusted associate, Davis Ackhaffer, a man familiar with me since law school, who reacted to the news as I anticipated, balanced, forward-thinking, providing support without intrusion. Davis, aware of the situation's broad strokes due to my necessity of confiding in someone at work, never sensationalized it. I appreciated him every day for that. The legal process was lengthy and far from ideal, yet I feel it's essential to provide a straightforward account. The process, in its entirety, proved to be the most draining professional encounter of my life, a statement I make with conviction as someone who has navigated complex real estate disputes across 3 different jurisdictions. Renata enlisted the services of attorney Philip Boggs, renowned for his competence and aggressive approach from his college street practice. In any other circumstance, he would have been an adversary I would have admired. The initial dispute was over ownership of the house. Through Boggs, Renata contended that her design input had created a form of unrecorded equity that surpassed the property's deed. I countered with financial records, purchase history, renovation bills, and years of income statements. The dispute I anticipated prevailing, and indeed it was so, albeit prolonged over 5 months with expenses borne beyond mere finances. The Zillow listing remained active for 31 days before I permitted Grant to accept an offer. The buyers were a Raleigh-based couple moving to Charlotte, aged mid-30s, first urban home buyers, charmed by the pergola. In Petra's conference room on a Friday afternoon in April, I signed the documents, subsequently spending 20 minutes idling in my car outside her building. The house fetched a price greater than our initial investment, as is common in Dilworth when one endures the wait. After legal fees and fair settlement, I emerged financially beneficial. Mentioning this monetary advantage wasn't to boast of triumph, for it was not a victory but as a truth. I had safeguarded what I constructed, This was my objective. Notably, Sullivan Price departed Charlotte 4 months after the truth unfolded. The Noda Hotel renovation project was handed over to another architectural company, causing Renata to lose the contract. I discovered this through my professional network, not by actively seeking the information, but due to the tight-knit nature of Charlotte's design and real estate circle where news spreads quickly. I didn't feel any satisfaction about the situation. Instead, I felt exhausted. This development has sparked a question from nearly everyone who learned about it. Why didn't you speak to her? Why didn't you address the issue when you knew? It's a valid inquiry. Let me attempt to answer honestly. I've been contemplating this since March, so I've had plenty of time to think about it. The most accurate thing I can tell you is that confrontation at that moment would have served my anger, the desire for validation, the need to reveal the secret, but it would have put at risk everything I spent years constructing. I understand this because I've witnessed similar outcomes with my clients. The spouse who publicly reprimands their partner during dinner, but later discovers they have no recorded stance in a negotiation. The partner who chooses to salvage the marriage out of affection, and then, after a year and a half, faces me with little more than hope and a shared bank account. I didn't challenge Renata due to my remaining love for her, which was still viable enough to avoid undermining my own standing. That might not sound romantic. I understand it isn't, but it is true. And if I'm being completely candid, there was a part of me that didn't confront her because I was apprehensive about what she might disclose, afraid she'd reveal something I couldn't erase, afraid she'd inform me that she hadn't been content for longer than I was aware, that I had overlooked it, that everything I believed I was providing, presence, constancy, and effort, wasn't what she required. That fear was genuine. It underpinned all the planning. It still does. I'd like to share insights about the intricate nature of their divorce proceedings, as many may have an idealized notion of how a marriage legally ends without considering the kitchen table arguments. Petra and Philip Boggs cautiously approached each other for months, displaying the calculated patience characteristic of skilled professionals, aware that neither party benefits from hasty actions. The process involved depositions, and I was required to reveal extensive financial details, exposing every financial decision made over a 12-year span, including its source, destination, and household structure. This financial disclosure felt surprisingly therapeutic, akin to recounting one's life in chronological order, but with each episode assigned a monetary value. It provided clarity. I had contributed more than I had realized in various aspects, financially, emotionally, across all categories relevant to the court. However, this wasn't vindication. It was merely data. Information, whether in law or life, is of substantial importance. I was unaware of Renata's dire financial situation during our relationship. Her pride and identity were tied to her design business, which bore debts from a studio expansion she undertook 2 years prior. The Noda Hotel contract, symbolizing both creative potential and financial stability for her, was lost, causing a substantial impact. I learned about this through the discovery process, a chilling way to discover someone's vulnerability whom you once loved. Through Petra, I conveyed that I had no intentions of making any legal claims against her business. My goal was to finalize the house sale and divorce proceedings. I didn't want her to suffer financially. I wish to clarify this because I believe it is pertinent information. The settlement was reached in May. The house sale proceeds were divided based on the financial records Petra had prepared. Renata was given a figure symbolizing her long-time housework contributions, a numerical recognition within the confines of legal system. The majority was mine, a reflection of financial truth rather than moral judgment. I distinguish between the two. We sealed the last documents on a midweek afternoon, with Renata and me not present in the same room. Our attorneys advised this separation, and I concurred. Unspoken words that didn't find their place at that negotiating table had already been expressed through briefs, counter-arguments, and the drawn-out, costly process of divorce litigation. I signed my copies, Petra served as a witness, and so it was finalized. I returned to the Moorhead Street apartment, ordered pizza from Tryon's Eatery, and watched an unmemorable baseball game. No sense of relief or sorrow filled me at that moment. After holding my breath for an extended period, I found myself releasing it, struggling to adjust to normal breathing again. The apartment on Moorhead Street transformed into a life, not a replacement for the one lost, but a distinctly different one, marked by its quietude in some aspects and loudness in others. For the first time in years, I began cooking with purpose, discovering hidden opinions about food that had been overshadowed by Renata's perspectives for more than a decade. Weekend mornings now found me running along the Greenway near South End, a routine absent since my late 30s. Even a simple act like sleeping in the center of the bed took on immense significance. In June, my brother Fletcher paid a visit. We attended a Hornets preseason game at Spectrum Center and dined at a barbecue joint on Brookshire Freeway that Fletcher swore was the best he'd ever tasted, a sentiment typical of him. In the midst of making coffee, Holden was complimented on his apartment by a visitor saying, "This is actually quite decent, Holden," to which he responded with agreement. During early summer, Holden and Davis had undertaken a significant commercial litigation case involving a land use conflict in Mecklenburg County's eastern region concerning a development demanding concentrated attention for the upcoming year. He relished the challenge, as it offered mental stimulation he needed. Dating was not on his agenda, nor was he intrigued or prepared. Some individuals, upon ending a marriage, appear to require another person swiftly to validate something or to fill the void left behind. Yet, Holden did not resonate with that sentiment. Instead, he felt the necessity of understanding himself before sharing space with someone else. Renata contacted him in July, not through lawyers but directly via his personal cell phone, a number they had shared during their dating days. He almost declined the call, then eventually answered. She expressed, "I wish to sincerely apologize directly and independently, not via Philip, not as part of an agreement only to you." I responded, "Understood." She continued talking for a while. She discussed how she had felt the marriage constricting over the past few years, how she felt herself fading into the aesthetic of our constructed life rather than its essence, how Sullivan Price had been a diversion she mistook for a resolution. She admitted feeling ashamed. She stated the word ashamed plainly without sugarcoating it. She acknowledged that she had made choices that were wrong by any standard, even her own, and expressed regret for them. She said, "I believe I knew somewhere deep down that you were aware of this before the text. I believe I sent that message because I needed something to occur. I needed someone to act." I said, "I can't determine if that makes it better or worse for me." She replied, "I understand." A lengthy pause ensued, a heavy silence signifying an end. "Are you all right?" she inquired. "Yes, I am," I replied. "I believe I already am for the most part. Are you too?" She responded, "I'm making efforts." I trusted her statement. Truthfully, I believed Renata was striving to transform into someone she couldn't be within our marriage, and I wished her success. I didn't want her to perish. That had never been my wish. What I desired was survival and preservation, and I achieved it. I advised her to take care of herself. She reciprocated the advice, and that essentially concluded our conversation, which our marriage had delayed for 2 years. There is a woman in my office building. Her name is Wren. She's a litigator at an upper-floor firm who was acquainted with Renata and me socially, as professionals often are. We crossed paths at firm gatherings, legal association dinners, among other events. After news of the divorce spread, Wren sent me a message saying merely, "I heard. I'm sorry. Have you noticed if you'd like to meet up for coffee at some point?" After 3 weeks, I agreed. We've had coffee together 4 times now. She is insightful, witty, and unyielding in her views on case law while harboring opinions about coffee that make me worry as a professional due to her excessive sugar usage. Once, over dreadful lobby coffee, she questioned if the Zillow listing scenario was premeditated or spontaneous. I replied that it was planned. She gazed at me for a prolonged moment and remarked, "That is the most lawyerly thing I've ever heard." I inquired if it was a compliment. She responded, "It's an observation." I chose to view it as a compliment. I am uncertain about Wren's nature or destiny. I am not ready to discern that yet, and she appears to grasp this, which provides its own form of reassurance. However, the coffee serves me in an unexpected manner. It reminds me that the world beyond what has ended continues to move, teeming with individuals who are intriguing, complex, and worth getting to know. Straightforwardly, I feel compelled to express my thoughts as I believe they hold significance. Many have inquired about the legitimacy of my actions, ranging from friends, work associates, Fletcher, and even my father. They've questioned if selling the house without prior notice was fair, if my calculated approach, preparation, and strategic silence were moral. Frankly, I can't definitively say it was right. However, I know it was lawful. I acknowledge its effectiveness in sparing me from a negotiation that would have been emotionally taxing had it occurred in February instead of March. In a divorce, particularly one involving property disputes, Being prepared is the deciding factor between stability and ruination. Yet I am also aware that Renata woke up to find her home listed on Zillow. I understand what that must have felt like, and I recognize there's an alternative narrative where I could have approached the situation differently. I sat down, shared what I knew, had a difficult conversation months ago, and allowed the legal proceedings to commence based on mutual understanding rather than strategic ambush. I didn't take that decision. I can't say whether it was the best one. I chose what I could in the circumstance I found myself in, which is all anyone can truthfully claim about their own decisions. What I am sure of is this. I didn't deceive, I didn't damage anything beyond repair. I preserved what I had worked hard to build throughout my adult life, and I emerged victorious on the other side. The apartment in Moorhead now belongs to me. In August, I signed a legitimate lease, discarded the remaining furniture, bought a couch that suits the room perfectly and pleases only me. There's a bookshelf in my study filled with books I desire, not ones to impress with their aesthetics. The kitchen allows me to make coffee exactly as I like it. Recently, I passed through Dilworth. Haven't visited that place since the deal was finalized. Driving along East Boulevard, I passed blocks familiar from 12 years of walking, the coffee shop where Renata and I would meet on Sunday mornings, the intersection offering a glimpse of our former house's roof. Without conscious thought, my pace slowed. The new inhabitants have a bike parked on the porch, a wreath adorning the door. A light shines in the room that was once Renata's home office. Someone else is living in the house I know intimately. I continued driving. Fletcher questioned during his last visit if I had learned anything new. I replied it felt too profound for a parking lot. He said, "You learn best when life happens to you in a parking lot." Indeed, he was correct. The lessons I've gained are more complex than a simple takeaway. I've come to understand that being physically present in a marriage is not the same as being understood within it. Consistency can sometimes build an unseen barrier. You're consistently present to such an extent that people overlook expressing their needs due to the disturbance it might cause, since tranquility is considered polite. For years, I believed everything was stable. I assumed we were doing well. Renata was gradually fading into the calmness of our existence, and I was either too complacent or too fearful of acknowledging the potential consequences. I've come to understand that readiness doesn't equal safety. I meticulously planned for the legal and financial implications of my marriage's dissolution, with a diligence surpassing that of most professional endeavors, and it was beneficial. However, it didn't shield me from finding myself in a hotel room at midnight, clutching a bag of Thai food and pondering over the vanishing of the past 12 years. I've realized that making the correct decision and being brave aren't always one and the same, and recognizing this difference is a lifelong task. If you found yourself in a situation similar to mine, symbolically speaking, when you strive to maintain composure as your carefully constructed world trembles, I hope this account proves worth your read. I'm not here to claim perfection in my actions. I did what was feasible with the resources at hand, as we all inevitably do. However, I emerged from the other side. I now sleep centrally on my bed, brew coffee according to my taste, and cruise through Dilworth occasionally without pause. The 48 phone calls, the single word of finality, the listing on Zillow some aspects I would handle differently. I cannot feign otherwise. But I wouldn't have exited a relationship that was already disintegrating simply because departing demanded a stronger form of bravery than persisting. Thank you for your attention to this narrative. What struck me most profoundly about this tale was not the Zillow listing or the 47 phone calls, but the realization that someone can be physically present in a union for years and remain completely unseen by the partner standing beside them. This is the tranquil loneliness seldom discussed. I believe many viewers, comprehending it intimately, are nodding in agreement. If this narrative stirred something genuine within you, leave a comment below. I read each one thoroughly, and if you aren't subscribed yet, now would be an opportune moment.